Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Katie Snow,
Dr. Eric Snow.
and we are here with Nick Labinsky, and we are so excited today. Nick is a nutritional consultant and a leading industry expert in quality standards, and our goal today of what you as a consumer should know and what to look out for before purchasing a supplement. And also, we have provided a couple of bottles of our new supplement line, Dr. Eric Snow. We provided those for Nick to discuss today and give us a grade on those supplements. But we'll go ahead and introduce Nick and let him take over and give an overview of his background, his expertise, and his credentials, and tell a little bit about him and how he is connected to this industry. So go ahead and we introduce to you Nick Labinsky.
Thank you, Dr. Eric. Thank you, Dr. Katie. I've been in this industry for over 11 years. I started actually with regulations, if you will, GMPs as they're called, good manufacturing practices. So I got to see a little bit what the Wild West is to what it is today. The interesting thing is when I started in 2009, the regulation hadn't changed, but what the industry was focusing on is they just want to know you were doing something because it was the Wild West. Pre of that, there was no regulation. Actually, there was regulation under foods, but not dietary supplements. And that's evolved. Over the time, the reasons for the citations, the warning letters they give companies, it took 10 months for them to put it out because they're literally writing law. And it's evolved over time, even though the law hasn't changed. It's just the interpretation. So I got to really grow with that from the very beginning. When I started as a technician with a company, there were only less than 50 people. So that June of 2009 is when it was enforced. And then I worked my way up through product development, also just quality in general to chief operations officer for another company at that time. But I got to learn a lot, and we applied many different techniques to ensure the products that we were making and testing were clean, which, from these products that you provided to me, the greens powder and the turmeric powder are both kind of examples. We talked about these. You really use the philosophies that we used back then or still do, and really to make a good supplement. Because if you just follow the regulations, it doesn't mean you actually make a clean supplement. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so you're mentioning the turmeric power. Turmeric has gotten so popular. They've done a lot of research. It's even as big as fish oil and probiotics. As when we see patients come in and see what they're already taken before they come into our office, we tend to see that they're on some type of turmeric product. But tell us a little bit about the background in turmeric and how careful you really have to be in making sure that you're getting a product that actually has turmeric in it, and even maybe some things that we don't want in our turmeric product.
Yeah. Well, first, let me say, whenever there's high demand, there's going to be people trying to make an extra buck. Beyond turmeric, honey, very common item. It's one of the most adulterated items in the industry, period, food industry, in the world, because there's more honey consumed than produced. So what do? They put, beet syrup, and they put some other things just to dilute it down. And with turmeric, they say that over 60% of the population is taking that now. It's almost like multivitamins. Everybody, they've done a great marketing job to say, you should be taking turmeric every day. What that's caused is back in 2019, there was a study that came out of Stanford that was evaluating turmeric out of Bangladesh, showing very, very high lead levels. For them, it was like 500 micrograms, which is like 50 times the amount that's really allowed by the FDA. And they said that they had no other reports of that, happening otherwise, from 2019. Now, nothing out of anywhere, any other part of the world. Well, from my personal experience, when I was in the laboratory many years ago, back in 2012, we actually got turmeric that was painted with lead chromate. 2012. So this is 7 years earlier. And we got this material and it was 1,600 micrograms, 1.6 milligrams. Now, that's like 300 times the amount that's allowed. That's a lot of lead.
Right.
And, lead accumulates and it's hard to keep out of the body. So that can really do harm because, when there's too much demand, they're going to do something, especially if they have stuff left over at the end of the season. We're like, oh, I need 1,000 kilos, but I only have, I have this stuff that's old over here that I can maybe give them, but I need to make it look good. So they paint it. And that's what they did. And the scary thing is when we told the vendors, like, you're selling painted turmeric to us, they denied it. You're like, you're the only ones complaining about this. Because back in 2012, only a few years after the GMPs, many of the medium-sized companies just weren't doing testing still. It was really the very large companies were doing some, heavy metals being the basics. And for the, the company where I was working at, we had the laboratory and they came in and just saw, they asked us, you do heavy metals, you do pesticides, and, saw the laboratory that I built and they're like, you know what you're doing, and walked out. And that's all they wanted back then. It's different now. They actually dive in. But, turmeric is one of those things that they, any way they can adulterate, they're gonna try. And actually I have a slide I wanna show you of a sample that we got in. And, painting is very simple. People can, that's a simple thing that they do to make it look better. But they can get more sophisticated with this to basically fool the testing because they know some people are doing some testing. Let me show that real quick and let me share a screen here. Can you see all that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. So this turmeric that we got in, this is what's called a high performance thin layer chromatography. And just to summarize it, it's basically a fingerprint of the turmeric. And the turmeric itself, all these little bands is basically the active ingredients within that botanical. And from this, looks great. I wouldn't, question the quality of the material itself until you went to the microscopy we did. And when you do microscopy, it's basically looking under a microscope, looking at the cells of that botanical. And when we did that, we saw that there was these little clusters of these little squares, if you will. And turmeric has a lot of starch. It's actually a root, and that's natural to it. So what they did, instead of just painting the actual turmeric, they painted the starch to look like it and added it in there. And they're thinking that you can't tell the difference, but we had some of the best minds in the industry, which is, if you're going to buy supplements, you got to kind of find out what their quality department's like. If they have one person or two and they sell like 100 supplements, that's a red flag right there. You need to be, you can have PhDs on staff and you can have the smartest 2 or 3 people in the world and they're not going to be able to do everything. So you really need a team. At that time we had like 30 plus and that's what it takes. And, having somebody do this for 30 years, you're going to get the results you need because these are all kind of legal documents, if you will. But what they did here, they tried to hide it so you wouldn't see it. I've seen it where, carrots, very common item, carrot powder that came in. It was just painted maltodextrin. It was actually no carrot at all. Oh, they just painted it to look like carrot. So they can be, sneaky like this, or they can actually, just be blatant and just give you something that's not even a botanical at all. It's literally painted sugar.
Wow. Yeah, and think of that too, like maltodextrin could be from a corn or a wheat source. So say you have someone thinking I'm taking pure carrot powder and they're allergic to gluten, right, and they're taking this in. I mean, they could be scratching their head like, what's going on? I don't understand why I'm having, symptoms of wheat exposure. And it's because it's in their adulterated supplement. So
yeah, Dr. Katie and I, when we first set out on this venture to formulate really high quality products, so many places didn't pass our testing as far as like questions. We were surprised how many people were just getting bulks of products in, never being tested at all. The product would come in, they put it straight into the capsule or, make a tablet out of it. And it was really shocking to us being in, this industry for so long, how many people out there reading research and wanting a good quality product, but they're not even getting the product that they want. Or these products are so diluted that they don't, get the, say with turmeric, the inflammatory relief that they're looking for. So it's just a big eye opener.
Yeah, they say that less than 1% are really kind of doing what's necessary to detect this kind of contamination. What I actually did at the laboratory, our philosophy there was something called orthogonal testing. That's doing many different techniques or different types of tests to answer kind of the same question, which was really identity and adulteration, right? And microscopy, HPLC, ash and insoluble ash, sometimes DNA, and a slew of other tests were used to see if it was clean. But less than 1% of the industry. Now, just to give you perspective of that, and just so you know, less than 20, as they say, 20% or maybe more are not doing anything, like zero.
Right.
And like making out of a garage or something. So, but just to give you perspective, 10,000, they think there's about 10,000 manufacturers in the world. And the FDA can only audit about 5% of those every year. It's even a little bit less now. And there's only 50 people, and that's one of the reasons, just sheer capacity. And a lot of those are re-audits, meaning they've already been there before. And so that kind of frequency, and this industry is growing literally 6 to 12% a year. There's a lot of new fly-by-night companies. There's people that are there just to make a buck, and they don't care what happens to you. In terms of just the past, if you look at just the history of the last couple of years, high-tech pharmaceuticals putting Schedule III anabolic steroids into their product, ABH, which was a contract manufacturer that for 10 years had citations from the FDA, literally warning letters to them for the last 8 years. Wow. And finally, this year, they got a consent decree to recall the last 6 years worth of product. That was over 849 brands affected by them, like 1,600 different SKUs. But it took them 10 years. So if you think that just because they're a big manufacturer, or if they're, that it's going to make you save product, they're not. Because these big manufacturers, there's some good ones. I'm not going to say the whole industry is completely bad, but the 1%, these big manufacturers are not the 1%, are doing stuff that the law allows, which is like skip law testing, where you can actually test the C of A once, and the C of A's from these vendors, they'll have just one test for ID, because that's what the law says. It actually says at least one, when everybody interprets that as only one. When that's why the orthogonal testing is needed, because you need to do multiple tests. You're not going to be able to see everything just with one test. Right. So they do all those tests, and then they audit the vendor, and then they can skip testing. They can skip everything but ID and micro. So heavy metals, pesticides. Right. We see, sometimes from the best vendors have contamination, especially pesticides, because you'll get it where it's a non-organic field next to organic field, and you have spray over it. DDT is the half-life of there. It's in the soil everywhere, and there's high concentrations, because all of a sudden a plot that was non-organic becomes organic, and the roots get down in there and take up some of that, pesticides, and it's actually incorporated into the plant itself. So it's, the people that are doing it right, it's less than 1%. So you got to be very careful who you choose to pick supplements from.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So help us with, to just teach our audience. So you want to get some turmeric and you're looking on the label. What are you looking for as a consumer to make sure that, hey, this is a good product, or even maybe, hey, this is a red flag to look for?
So let's just take your turmeric powder. So in this bottle, on the sides of these bottles, just like you have, there should be an address. And that's kind of the first thing you need to look at, because a lot of the bad companies People that are putting like drugs into their product, or they're just not doing anything at all, are taking that off. Why? Because it's much harder for the FDA to find you. They literally have to kind of do forensics to figure out where this came from, and it takes a while. And a lot of these, like I said, are fly-by-night. So that's the first indicator. If you don't see that, red flag. Be very cautious buying that. Second thing in the front, they're making outlandish claims such as cures cancer, cures like a disease. You just can't do that. In fact, that's one of the statements that has to be there. So if it says, outlandish claims such as cures cancer, or it doesn't have this FDA statement that says, not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure disease, you could probably guess that there's going to be something wrong with that product, because that's just basic regulation. Beyond that, you do need to do your own research. I highly suggest that, because you need to go online, look up these companies, and see if there's any bad press about them. ABH, that was in the news. That's on the major sites. See if there's, and you can go to the FDA website and look them up, because that's all it's our taxes. That's what's paying for their salaries and all the initiatives over there. So all that's public domain. So you should be able to look it up yourself. So those are some indicators. Also, the supplement facts panel just itself. If you see that it says, hey, the sexual enhancement supplements, especially, that says, it helps with you in the bedroom, but it doesn't have a supplements facts panel. That's a big issue. That's a big concern, because that's, once again, basics. So those are, kind of few things on the actual bottle itself that can just be red flags for you. That do your more research. And honestly, if I didn't see one of these, I just wouldn't buy it, period.
Yeah, that's good information.
Yeah, exactly. So next question, Nick, with greens being so popular, we're seeing that most households, one person is taking a green supplement in the household. So in this industry, what are some of the issues with the green supplements out there, and how can we be assured that we're taking the highest quality greens? And do we need to test for pesticides, even with the product being certified organic, when a company like ours, buys it in bulk? Is this something that needs to be tested every batch?
So greens is kind of up there with, turmeric. Everybody uses it kind of like a multivitamin for general wellness, and general wellness is what everybody wants. Transform your health naturally, right? So that being said, greens are also one of the items that can be highly adulterated. And it's sometimes from, the big vendors even, because just because you're a big vendor, and even if you're trying to do things right, accidents happen. And if they're not doing the proper testing, they're going to miss it. Let me show you another slide of, an example of what we've seen in the past. And let's see. So this is a turmeric. Here's a alfalfa leaf, which is, similar to the alfalfa leaf you have in your formula, except this wasn't fermented. And once again, this is the high performance thin layer chromatography that, everything looks fine. These lanes match up, but everything, if you just did this test, it's very CSI looking. People like that, right? They like to see this. And that's usually the only test they do. But when we did orthogonal testing, where we did microscopy afterwards, what we found was there was abundant starch. There shouldn't be abundant starch in this product, despite the fact that it has the active ingredients. There's starch that shouldn't be there. There's that corn maltodextrin, some GMO derived maltodextrin, and then there was some kind of crystalline material that we thought was probably glass. And at the time, the vendor was saying that something may have got it was ground glass in the product.
Wow.
And
that's scary.
Very scary.
It's scary, and somebody's probably eating this somewhere, because we don't buy everything. So we reject it back. And what do you think the vendor's doing with that material? Hundreds of thousands of dollars of material, you think they're just throwing it away?
Right.
No. They're sending it to somebody else that doesn't have the quality aspects that you're doing, and they're putting it in a product, and somebody somewhere is eating this. And you have to ask yourself, would you eat this? And I don't think, we give this to our families, and I wouldn't give this to my dogs, period. Well,
Exactly.
there's class for sure, but even with just the starch, I wouldn't, go after it. So you need to, which with your current greens power, I know you're doing that kind of same philosophy as well with this. You're doing that orthogonal testing technique, and it's actually fermented, which is just another plus. Fermentation is a great way to make it bioavailable. The fermentation literally breaks down the cell wall. And if there's a high sugar content, you can actually reduce the sugar content to 0. And it's also a great way to produce postbiotics in the actual product itself. And postbiotics gives some of those benefits that you see from the probiotics itself. So it goes prebiotics, which feeds the probiotics, which they then produce postbiotics. And that is very unique to your product. And I think, and you have Lactobacillus reuteri, which is a very powerful probiotic in just in itself. So, and you have a prebiotic. So this is the trifecta, if you will. And I think this is this is a great product to take.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely proud of that product, and we're excited that we're able to provide quality products that have been tested. And so we sleep easy at night knowing that our products are clean and they're very effective as well. That brings me to another question. And so we're learning that there are some things that the FDA requires companies to test for, but tell us about some things that need to be tested that a lot of companies are not testing for in their supplements.
So, like I mentioned before, the actual regulations, I think the big one is that it says at least one test. And, I've shown you a couple of examples through other items that if you just did one test, you would never have caught the issue. And, there's a slew of other tests that really need to be done. For example, aflatoxins. Aflatoxins is made by mold. It's like one of the most carcinogenic items known to man. Can cause liver cancer, a slew of other cancers. And it's part of the mycotoxin family, if you will, which is a whole set of toxins produced by mold and fungi. Mm-hmm. So those many manufacturers just don't test for that. Not even the vendors they buy it from. And for years I wondered, is it just a case of people just don't know? And one of the largest companies we worked with at the time produced a extract for us. And this was a lot of material we're buying, very specialized material, thousands of kilos, lots of money. And we had this huge amount of aflatoxins in there on this one batch. And so it literally took them 6 months to research where did this come from? And it wasn't part of their process. It was in the raw material they used. Mm-hmm. And so we were like, okay, and they took it back, but we're like, well, we want another batch, and we want you to test the raw material. And their response to us was, that's not part of our spec, so we're not going to test for it. Right. Which tells you it's these large companies that I hate to say the accountants run, that they don't want to spend the money. They rather, turn a blind eye. Mm-hmm. And, just test the basic, very minimum, because they don't want anything to fail. They rather just not know about it. Mm-hmm. And they basically told us they would never sell to us again. Mm-hmm. And, at the end of the day, that's part of my values, that, that's integrity and transparency and that quality kind of, without compromise. That's something that we need to always hold as, professionals in this industry. Mm-hmm. Don't compromise, because you're eating this stuff. Let me show you a picture of one of adulterations and kind of tell you what FDA stance is. Let me share another screen with you all. So this next one, this is Siberian ginseng that we got in. And if you look at the left, which is the adulterated Siberian ginseng, you can see there's a lot of crystal type material there. And if you look at what it's supposed to look like, the reference standard, there's night and day difference. And what this material that we got, I mean, it's shocking how much other stuff is in there. I mean, you could see the Siberian ginseng because everything, it was tested by DNA, it was tested by HPTLC, everything passed until we got to this point. And this was a gross adulteration. And, you know, the FDA recognizes this happens all the time. In fact, oregano, once again, another common item, highly adulterated. They, you know, what they do is they add this material in to weigh down the lot to make an extra buck, right? And the FDA recognizes this happened, and they're saying, what should we do with this? Because once again, if you ship it back to them, they're just going to sell it to somebody else. And the FDA suggested to burn it. And nobody's going to burn money because it's money at the end of the day. The manufacturer, you know, you have to pay for this a lot of times up front, and they would literally have to burn hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you reject it back, expecting integrity that they would fix the problem, not use it. But this is the kind of this extra orthogonal testing, the microscopy that needs to be done to that. Other testing that needs to happen. I would say, of course, pesticides in every lot, even organic. Some of the organic materials that we've gotten in the past was highly contaminated with pesticides. You know, more than I've seen on non-organic material. Legal dyes. You know, not just the lead chromate, but just other dyes that they use in these botanicals, from turmeric to, if it's beet, like old beet, they'll put red dye into those. You know, in terms of clandestine adulteration, what is clandestine adulteration? That's actually putting drugs into products to give it a clinical effect. So, and they go from all different parts of the spectrum where they actually try to hide it, where they grind it up and you have to find it. And sometimes they just put a pill in there with the capsule. They're like making it in the garage and they're selling this at the 7-Eleven, you know, the corner store. And, you know, it's that blatant. And they're putting these drugs that they're getting cheap that are called analogs. And what analogs is the pharmaceutical companies, the science they rejected. It's these items that have different side effects, similar effects, but different side effects, and which includes death. And you can see in terms of Cialis and Viagra has 150 different analogs. So what they do is they take one of those, put it into the supplement in commerce, don't put a address on there. And when somebody dies, the FDA gets alarms go off. They try to find them. They're a, you know, fly-by-night company, and they wait maybe a year, and then they put in another analog into it. Right. Just recently, 2014, there was sibutramine, which is it's illegal. It was a drug that came on the market, and then they made it illegal because it was a weight loss drug that was killing people. And it was just found. It was found in 2014 in a dietary supplement, and just last year, in 2019, another analog was found. So they're just waiting for time so they can make a quick buck and get out of here. And it's not just domestic companies or international companies selling here as well. Because you should really look to partner or buy a supplement from a company that is domestic, really. There's so much fraud that goes on abroad that you have to be very careful. The amount of pollution some of these countries have, and the quality standards are not the same, and it's hard for their similar FDA, identical agencies, if you will, are just not as stringent. And, you know, we don't have capacity here. They definitely don't have capacity over there. No. You want that. Now, having botanicals from different parts of the world, you know, I traveled the world when I had my previous company looking for botanicals, and 75% of the botanicals we found failed. But if you're doing it right, when you get a good supply, it really doesn't fail. And then you get that clean product. A lot of companies don't do that. Yeah, they search the world for unique items, but they're not doing the required testing to actually give you clean products. And another point about this, they're always trying to find, okay, what makes the product more unique? So, turmeric, everybody has turmeric. So what makes my turmeric different? Well, I put a protein on there so that way it's more bioavailable, and when you do that, it's become something called a new dietary ingredient. And when you do something outside of like fermentation, which has been done for thousands of years, because the FDA said before October 15th, 1994, if it didn't exist in commerce, it's considered a new dietary ingredient. And you have to prove the safety of the product. And in 1994, there was 4,000 supplements on the market. Right now, they estimate about 90,000 supplements on the market.
Wow.
And how many NDIs have been actually submitted to the FDA? About 1,300. So there's a huge disparity between what should be happening is people submitting these safety studies 75 days before they go to market, and what's really happening. And they just can't, they've been going over the last 10 years trying to figure out, what do we do with this? The industry is growing too fast. There's only 50 people of us. How do we enforce this? So you got to be careful, because abroad, they're going to come up with unique ways that I'm going to be trying to sell this. It promises you the world, but is it really safe? So stick with, these close to home, if you will.
Yeah, and that was one of the questions that we had for you, Nick. Where in the world are a lot of the cheaper supplements, like where are they being manufactured? And yes, you do have to source and test and know there are other parts of the world where we're getting some of the ingredients, but the actual manufacturing process during which they do the testing, where are some of these cheaper companies doing this in other parts of the world?
A lot of adulteration we've seen, and I have to say first this, I'm not saying these countries only produce bad stuff. In fact, we've had a lot of good stuff coming out of there before, but the frequency of contaminated products from lead, pesticides, and everything tends to be more in the India region and China. Now, you can get any quality you want over there for any price. But if you want the cheapest, you get what you pay for. I think I have to explain that. When you get a supplement, you can't tell by just looking at it if it has pesticides, if it has aflatoxins, and if it's spoiled in some way that has like pathogens. With foods, things wilt, it starts decaying, it turns brown. You get some kind of indicator, the smell of it. This is dried. It doesn't smell any different from now until later. And you got to be careful with these new dietary ingredients. The breakdown products could be toxic. And that's another issue. So, you have to be able to trust the manufacturer's doing what he needs to do to ensure that. And, parts of the world that's not always doing that is, China and India, even though you can find some good things. So you got to be very cautious of that.
Right.
We've seen some stuff out of Europe. We've seen stuff out of South America, but India and China tends to be the biggest region, but you get what you pay for.
Right. And that totally makes sense.
Yeah. So what would you, to just teach, the consumer, what would you tell them to look for? How do they know, say they got the supplement and it's contaminated? What can they, could they experience, or how does somebody might know that, hey, this is a bad supplement I'm taking?
And you're saying in terms of the actual product itself, they feel a reaction to it?
Yeah. What might be some of the experiences they might have, and that would be a trigger to know, hey, there might be some contamination in this supplement?
Okay. Yeah. So beyond, just the visual indicators, when you're taking a supplement, and let's say it was for weight loss, and it says no thermogenics, meaning it doesn't have caffeine or anything, but maybe it has some hidden ephedra. And ephedra was banned on the market. It was a stimulant. And if you start having heart palpitations or, just a racing heart, which I personally, not myself, but a family member had happen, not with the products that I was producing in the past with the company I was working with, but another product she bought off of Amazon at the time. It said it was, I think it was just like green tea and turmeric and some other stuff. But she literally started having heart palpitations, couldn't get off the couch, and stopped it. So those are big indicators there are issues. And that's actually, if it sends you to the hospital, it's called a serious adverse event. And they're supposed to report that to the FDA. And actually should be able to report that back to the actual manufacturer through the address, once again. And they're supposed to report within 15 days to the FDA. How often that's happening, that's, it's up in the air, but that's just, one indicator. Also, what you can do is take a capsule, and let's say it's turmeric or something like that, and you just drop it in water, and you see, if, let's say you take like a dye and you drop it in water, and all of a sudden it just seems to spread like dye. You do that with a capsule, there's some ingredients, flavorings that can do that, but if it doesn't have that in there, you put it in the water, all of a sudden you may see this dye come out. So there's another way. Beyond that, a lot of times, here's an example of the past. This is before GMPs. Chompers was actually a laxative. It was supposed to be plantain leaf. And what they got in, because back then, this is, I believe, 1997, they got the material in. They just said, okay, the C of A says plantain leaf. I'm going to put a label on that for a laxative and sell it. Well, what they got in was foxglove, which has a natural heart arrhythmia drug in it. So, which is, if you have heart arrhythmias, that's what you need. But if you don't, it puts somebody in the hospital. So, unfortunately, a lot of the symptoms when you get something that's adulterated, especially with clandestine issues, or just botanicals that are not the right botanicals, you're either going to the hospital, you're deathly ill or sick. Some stomach upsets could be just, natural reaction, but if you're having anything beyond what's expected, what the claims are, you should be very cautious of that product. And never go beyond what the product suggests, unless directed by your healthcare practitioner.
Yeah, it's very good information.
Yeah, good advice. So we were talking about the quality testing a few minutes ago. When doing these types of higher quality testing methods, what's the failure rate for most raw ingredients? So what, I guess, most companies, when they're going through the testing, and they should be doing that on every batch like we're doing, what are we seeing as a percentage failure rate?
Back in my lab days, what we saw was over 75% failing for some type of test. Wow. And that's across the world, and that's the very scary part of all this. And this was organic material, and it's actually not only what extra stuff they put in that was adulterated. It was actually what was not in there. So let me show you one last slide here of an example of that. With a valerian root extract that we got in. So this was a valerian root extract that came in, organic. It was, it was great in terms of being able to provide that to our, the customers. But when we put it actually doing high performance thin layer chromatography, when you looked at the other ones, it was very even across, right? It was, my 3-year-old daughter could tell that it was the same. But here you can clearly see that above this level, it's missing, because these are the samples that came in. These were actual authenticated material, these last 4 lanes, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And we're clearly missing everything above this red line, this 0.4 basically. And what that was the vendor was extracting out with water. And with valerian root extract, valerianic acid is somewhat soluble in water, but you need ethanol. But ethanol costs more money. But if you do with water, you're still going to get an organic extract. It just won't do anything. But you can put on your label, hey, I got organic valerian root extract. but it's garbage. And we also saw this with, you know, the what they call the mark. So when they extract out everything, it's that extra powder that's left over. So you're not even selling you the extract, it's the leftover stuff that's usually for feed. And they're selling that as a powder, as, you know, valerian root powder to somebody that actually doesn't have anything in it. It's like a shell of material that's used for feed for, you know, the animals.
Yeah, so someone could be, well, I'm trying to take some sleep aid, it's valerian, and it's not working. I'll just try something different. But actually, they were getting something that had no active ingredient that was indicated on the bottle. So that's
we've seen that. We've been doing this for 15 years clinically, and I can't tell you how many times with different products, patients come in and maybe they have a particular product and they want to upgrade because they bought it at the local health food store, they got it off Amazon, and then they actually take the product that we produced or the product that we're carrying, and they come back and they tell us like, wow, that stuff is really potent. It works so well. And that's the difference, is these other products that are taken, you just don't have a guarantee that you're getting the active ingredient. Of course, these contaminations that we're learning about, and just not getting even what's on the label. And it's just a rampant problem in the industry. And this brings me to another question. We've taught this for years with people drinking water, how important the plastic that they put that water in. Many people don't realize it, but you go buy a bottle of water, and these plastic bottles are made so cheap, and it leaches into the water. So tell us how important the bottle is that your supplements come in.
So there's a lot of aspects to how important the bottles are. What you just mentioned was leachability, which is it's a common practice to measure that in the pharmaceutical industry. And you know, this industry is moving towards to enforcing kind of pharmaceutical standards. I'll never get there because nobody's going to buy CoQ10 at $180. It's just nobody's going to do that. But in the pharmaceutical industry, in terms of the testing practices, they're doing leachability studies in terms of what that liquid is. So if you have alcohol in there, does that plastic leach out over time? And so you got to make sure the compatibility is there. And is that, you know, I know you're making products that you're, you know, doing that for the liquids to make sure that it doesn't leach out. So that's the first thing, you know, are they using PET or HDPE? These are different forms of plastic. And let's say you have something that's like, that's lutein zeaxanthin or astaxanthin that's very labile to oxygen. You know, you can literally put it out on the table, and by 3 to 5% a day will just degrade to being nothing. So sometimes they put in these bottles, and they may do everything they think that's right, but the bottle itself literally breathes. Even though it's whole, there's actually oxygen can pass through over time. And, you know, certain types of plastics breathe more. So you got to make sure you're looking at that, and you need experts to do this. It's not something that, you know, college graduate necessarily could do it right off the bat. You need a team to do this, what I call the best minds in the industry, which I love that your products, that's your philosophy. And I can't explain enough how relieved I am that other people are still doing this. But, you know, beyond that, the color of your bottle is very unique. Photooxidation is a chemical process that literally breaks down the vitamins, the enzymes, the the chlorophyll in the product, and those are all beneficial. That's kind of why you take, especially with greens, you're taking those because it has those naturally in there. And you know, even the fermentation of postbiotics with enough light will break that down. Using something what you use is something called Violite, which actually protects you through part of the visible range, and actually a little bit into the UV range. So UV is also a concern as well. But I think you're using PET. PET with combination with Violite actually can help protect it from the UV range as well. So you're using, honestly, the best of the best for your packaging. Where a lot of people use white, or maybe it's a different amber color, Violet's the way to go, because that's what's really been proven to stop those photo oxidation from happening. So that's pretty important for the packaging. The packaging can make the product stable for 2 years, or it can be stable for like 30 days. So, you know, by the time it sits on your shelf, or they take it home, and let's say they only take it a couple days, and 28 days later, it's garbage. Kind of like the valerian root we just talked about.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there a way to tell on these bottles? Because I know you go in the grocery store and trying to make one trip through, and let me just grab my supplements while I'm here. And you look, and a lot of them have that like brown color bottle. So you think, oh, well, it's protected from the sun. Like, how would that differ from like the bottle that we use?
Well, let's first talk about the clear bottles, because there's these new clear bottles that, oh, you could see it. It looks very trendy, I guess is the best word for it. Very cool looking. That stuff's going to just completely degrade over time. You know, you leave it on your countertop by the window, it's done. Especially if it has like B12 or other B vitamins and other stuff. The amber bottles do have some protection, but it is definitely a level down from something like this. In terms of, I believe with the BioLite, you're getting almost 99% reduction in transmission of the light through this, through most of the visible range, including some of the UV. Lower part, as it gets closer, UV maybe like 10%, but that's substantially lower than amber, or of course clear, which is absolutely zero, or white bottles.
Yeah, we've learned so much on this journey, and you really see that just all the questions we ask, and looking at cost of different things and different options. You really do across the board get what you pay for, and it's really about the patient, it's about the consumer. You want to make sure they're having a good experience. It's a safe experience. Gosh, all the testimonies we've seen since we've practiced this natural health holistic model, nutrition should just be on the forefront, you know, for a treatment for so many symptoms and different diseases and disorders. And we see nutrition taking its place. However, we also see in the industry people taking advantage of that. And it ends up being more about a profit, you know, than it does about a quality product and a good patient experience.
You know, nutrition was the original medicine. I mean, that's where it all began. I mean, even aspirin, you know, white willow bark, where it came from. You know, it's really become a booming industry. Like I said, 6 to 12% a year in growth. And, you know, people are going to do bad things. They're going to take advantage of the growth. And you just have to make sure you do your homework with those products you take, because you're eating it. It's very concerning. People don't associate this like with the salad that they ate. You know, you're very cautious when you eat. Hey, it looks wrong. You know, I'm not going to eat. There's a hair in it. Oh, but there's pesticides. There's aflatoxins we're talking about. There's metals.
Pathogens.
If it could be visible, I think it would be a different story, but fortunately it's not.
Right.
Those are very good points.
Right. Yeah. Well, we appreciate the time you took to answer our questions. And, you know, we really want the people out there to know this information. It's hidden. It's just not where, you know, you can find it. And so having an expert in the industry that can share and I guess give us a grade on our supplements, so we have a good grade, I hope. But thanks for sharing. Thanks for being on with us so that we can get this information out into the hands of the public. So when they go out to make a supplement purchase, they're making the best decision. So we're joined. This is Nick Labinsky. I'm Dr. Katie Snow.
Dr. Eric Snow.
Dr. Eric Snow. And thank you for watching. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.